أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. May these days be blessed days for all of us and for our humanity. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the blessings of the great messenger, bring peace to our human community. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assist those who are being oppressed unjustly. And of course, every oppression is unjust. And congratulating us all on the days of the birth of the blessed Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. The blessed Prophet was the messenger and the message itself. He was the living example and he lived the message. What really brought people to his way was not only the communication of the Quran, but it was him living the communication. He was a living example, and people were touched by that example, and it is quite obvious. When we hear things, we reason with them, they appeal to us, but they may not move us at the core of our beings. But we find this even at a progressed stage in life, that when we see a person principled, genuine, congruent, they win our respect. And if we see a person whose behavior, whose mannerism, whose outlook resonates deep from within us, we are drawn and attracted to such a person. And we begin to trust those people, and we begin to seek guidance through their example. The case of the Prophet Muhammad was such a case, that he was a living example of godliness, of goodness, of tolerance, of beauty. This is what won the people towards him primarily and fundamentally. Now, I have quite a few things to say today, so I'll rush through it slightly. But you can imagine how genuine and sincere he was and how he won the trust of the people, that when he was preaching to a chieftain of Makkah, a blind man comes to him and interrupts him. The Blessed Prophet Muhammad turns away from that blind man, and it is quite expected, such a behavior, that if you have an opportunity, then you would want to seize that opportunity. And you can then revert to that other person at a later date, because there's a golden opportunity here that you do not want to lose. Now, at that point, the Blessed Prophet behaved in his humanness. But the verse came that you just disregarded him because he was blind. But what makes you so sure that he wasn't pure from within? And you rather give your attention to somebody who comes to you haughtily or to that effect. But how do you know whether he is cleansed from within? Now, the Prophet Muhammad recited those verses. That had a decisive impact on his audience. They said, look at his humility and look at how genuine this man is. Because anyone with an ounce of shrewdness would have concealed these verses, because these verses are modifying his own behavior. But he is not perturbed by this. Even though the verses are modifying his own behavior, even then, and it's a critique against him, even then he genuinely is giving it out. He is on his path. He is growing from within. It is not as if he is any less in his impeccable morality, because the very first surah said, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. Even at the time when he was ordained as a prophet, and even before that spiritual nurturing that the Quran brought in began, he was still at that peak of human virtues. So people saw that this man is at the peak of virtues. And for the sake of that virtue, he wanted to get as many people towards a virtuous path as possible. Yet the Quran is modifying his behavior. And he does not hesitate, and he says these verses out. This was a testament to the genuineness of this messenger, to the authenticity of this man. So people began to flock to him, not only because of the intellectual content of his message, but because of the way he was living the message. As it was coming, he was being sharpened, he was being polished, he was being refined beyond those glorious statuses at which he already existed. So the people saw genuineness in Prophet Muhammad, a lot of care, a lot of concern, a lot of love, a lot of humility. He's not out to gain anything for his own self. He is not covetous of power. He is not greedy. He is tolerant. He is forgiving. Now, the Prophet Muhammad's kindness, parental care was another thing that won people over. You see, you find from the Quran that he had this innocence about him and naivety when the Quran says they come to you and you're overawed and you're overwhelmed by the words that they say, but you do not know what is in their hearts. He actually deliberately overlooked the flaws of the people. He did not hold those things against them, and he tried to find the goodness within people. He found every opportunity to forgive people, to bring out the best within them. Now, he was acutely aware of the problems that were there. He was born as an orphan. Now, if you read his early history, life was very difficult for the Prophet Muhammad. His father wasn't there at his birth. He was given, obviously, to his wet nurse Halima. He comes back to his mother, and then his mother dies. So now he is in the care of his grandfather. Now, we have to understand and appreciate this very, very clearly, that orphans did not have the same status as their own biological offsprings, even if the orphan be your grandchild or your nephew. The orphans were disadvantaged. The Blessed Prophet understood the pain of being an orphan, of not having a direct parent to take care of him in that way that a parent takes care, of not having that strength of support behind him. So he understood the difficulties. And I encourage us all to read the history of the Blessed Prophet's childhood. And of course, do not read the versions that glorify the events, the ones written by the Muslims, but read the ones written by the Orientalists, because we can get a glimpse of the truth that we won't get otherwise from the Muslim writers, because of course we have a tendency to redact things and to edit things out. So it was a very difficult life that he led. He was poor. Without a doubt, he did not have wealth as a young person, and he grew up in difficulties. He made marriage proposal, but he was rejected, and read these things up. So he was at a very disadvantaged state. This made him acutely aware of the pains and the sufferings of the people around him. That shaped his character of kindness, of nurturing. And that is why we see his overwhelming concern for the orphans, for the disadvantage of the community. But at the same time, he was so brilliant that it did not also cause within him biases or prejudices against the rich and the wealthy. He saw goodness in them despite their lack of care. And he saw goodness within those who are deprived. It took a person like that to bring about a community like the one that he brought about. It had to be him and nobody else, with his unique circumstances and experiences. So the Prophet went about preaching his message in a way of forgiveness, encouraging the good from within. You see, he did not incentivize people That look, if you do this, you will get this in return in the worldly sense. He simply reminded people that look, there is something far beyond this world that is waiting to come. Now, if you want to secure yourselves for that eventual world, which is far more enduring and unending, then what you need to do is to refine the inner being. So he said, if you wish God to forgive you, forgive others. If you want God to tolerate you, tolerate each other. If you want God to overlook your flaws and your faults, then overlook the flaws and the faults of each other. The level of innocence with which he worked and the one he tried to instill within the souls is remarkable, to the extent that when he says that when somebody does anything wrong, or your brother, faithful brother, then make excuses for them. Do you know why? This is directly in line with the characteristic of God, that God makes excuses for his creatures. And we've seen this through hadith literature and some of the du'as, that God conceals the faults of his creatures even from the scribes that sit upon our shoulders. And we find from these ahadith of the Prophet, although these are in Sunni sources, and as life has progressed, I think I've understood that Sunni and Shiaism is wrong, actually. It's totally against what the Prophet preached, honestly, and that's on the side note. And I have to put in something to irritate people. In any case, salawat. So there's a hadith of the Prophet within the Sunni sources, and I hope Shias have it as well, that on the day of Qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will summon the children of Adam for a private conversation. And now, of course, you might say, I can't imagine on the day of Qiyamah having a private conversation. Forget the analysis. Just take the moral of the story. For a private conversation, I will say, do you remember all the things that you did in your earthly life? He said, yeah, I do, and I'm thoroughly embarrassed. What did I do in return? Allah, you concealed it all. You did not display my hidden flaws and faults, transgressions and sins to the onlookers. Allah will say, and today I will do the same for you. I will conceal everything. The Shia equivalent hadith is Kitabul Mu'min, in which Amirul Mu'minin Salamullah alayhi says that when the book of deeds will be opened, the creatures of God will find no fault therein. In embarrassment, their hearts will turn to Allah and say, but oh Allah, you knew very well, and you know very well what we have done. Why does it bear no trace? Allah will say, my pride that I take in you does not allow me to conceal your defects to others. So this thing that the Prophet was teaching was directly in line with the characteristics of God, that God makes excuses for you. Make excuses for each other. Become innocent from within. And this is the thing that appealed to people at the core of their beings. That beauty that he was bringing out, that beauty was relieving them of their turbulent human state. Our human condition, our humanness is not a comfortable place to be in. All these grievances, heavy-heartedness, all these thoughts being consumed, these superstitions, these weaknesses, sleepless nights, these worries. This is not a comfortable state. The Prophet simply said, let it go. Trust in Allah. There is a hereafter. It's a few days' life. If something is lost, it's because Allah wanted it to go. And if Allah wanted it to go, then He is not taking it away from you because He hates you or He is unkind. It is because He knows that after taking this, He is going to give you so much more, that you will tell Him, oh Allah, why didn't you take it all away? He said, pray and pray deeply to Allah. And even if He doesn't accept, on the day of Qiyamah, you will see the wisdom in what God was doing. He will say, oh Allah, if only you hadn't accepted any of my prayers in the dunya in return for this that you're giving me today. And that which Allah will give on that day will not only be paradise, the Prophet taught. It is something that you can have today. That light of Allah that shines, that is so wholesome, that is so fulfilling, that is so satisfying that you will not want anything but that. What the Prophet did was, he taught the beautiful morality and virtues of Allah to humanity. And with that, their hearts began to melt. They began to emerge in a state that they hadn't recognized formally, but a state that was very conducive from within, that felt so good and so right. Now the Prophet understood that human beings will never, ever cease to be different, because we are bodily after all. And our bodily cultures will make us different. Now I'm going to say a few things and I have to give another khutbah as well. But don't be offended. When I was the Imam at the Khoja Mosque, and may Allah forgive them for having me as their Imam, they've never recovered from that experience, and I know that. So there was a talk, should we allow non-Khojas to be members? And I was forceful, you should allow every non-Khoja to be a member, right? Now, we had Iranians, we had Iraqis, sorry guys. We had the reverts, the Afro-Caribbeans. Now, the thing that I didn't understand at that time, because I was much younger than what I am today, what I didn't understand there was the nuance, the humanness, the bodiliness. You see, I was very angry as a young man, and I said, no, forcefully, you need to accept them as members. There's only one Islam and one God. But of course, that was my naivety and my simplicity. That's an ideal situation. That's an ideal situation. You see, what the Prophet Muhammad did was, he said, look, there will be differences amongst you. They are inevitable. But what if you have an overarching objective that unites you all, in which you can be different at a level and you can be one at another level. And this is ultimately what forged the greatest ummah we've seen. He said, look, believe in one Allah, and through that you are all one. Pray together, fast together, give zakat, care for one another. This will give you that single identity that unites you all. And you will still do things differently. There will still be levels of discrimination that you need to constantly strive to remove from your souls. To create this culture of Hajj, and if you've ever been to Umrah and Hajj, you will know this. Every color stands side by side. There's no discrimination at that point. We are all praying together in Masjidul Nabi and Masjidul Haram. We all have the same language, that Islamic language, alhamdulillah, mashallah, assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam. You see the cordiality, you see the brotherhood, the source, the essence of the ummah there. You don't feel that you are in a strange place. You can associate with somebody from Indonesia, China, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, India. They're all one and the same in that, under that umbrella. So what he realized, that people will be different. In their ways of doing things, they'll be different. The Khojas have their own center and they have a way of doing things. The Iraqis have their own, the Punjabis have their own, the Iranians have their own. Yet, it is one people. So this is what the Prophet understood, that there is weakness and flaws within people. You can't arrive at an ideal situation straight away. It will take till the day of Qiyamah before they arrive at that maturity. And I believe right now we are arriving at that maturity. where we are going beyond color, ethnicity, we are going beyond nationalities. I know we are, and we are on the cusp of it, but it'll take some time before we get there. We have to be mindful that there are differences. So the Blessed Prophet, through the Quran, does two things. One is institutionalizes spiritual universal cultures, such as Hajj for the Muslims. Although the Quran does not restrict Hajj to the Muslims, you will see every verse. The Hajj verses, there are two, nothing to do with Muslims, it's for humanity at large. Kaaba is nothing to do with Muslims, it's for mankind as a whole. The 4 or 5 verses of the Kaaba are all for mankind, nothing to do with the Muslims or the Muslim Ummah. The Hajj culture. Then he talks with the people of the book. تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم. Come to that word that is equally agreed upon by all of us. أن لا نعبد إلا الله, that we will not worship except Allah. ولا نشرك به شيئا, and we will not associate with him anything. So he was forging a greater unity based on the principle of belief in same God and the virtuous state that God expects from us. But at the inner level, he went beyond it all. It is said, well, you know his final sermon, in which he talks about human rights and the abolishment of usury, the abolishment of any blood claims and vendettas. He removed all of them, and first and foremost, he forgave every debt that was owed to him and his own family. And he forgave the blood right that they had on others because of killing their own. He said, I forgive first and foremost, and I abolish it altogether. Then he said, there is no priority of an Arab over a non-Arab, nor of non-Arab over an Arab, black over white, or white over black. He said, treat your women well, for they are your equal partners. In a setting where they were not even considered equal human beings. He said this in his final sermon, bringing about that beautiful universality beyond the differences. But the most phenomenal thing that he did was, he recited the verse of Surah Hujarat at the conquest of Makkah. Now, of course, this particular verse, you will find that the reason for revelation are quoted as many. Somebody marrying a black person, or people, Arabs taking pride over non-Arabs. But one of the causes of revelation listed, and I feel maybe it was revealed in one instance, but then repeated on many or several different occasions. But at the conquest of Makkah, when the Blessed Prophet sent Bilal to give the adhan, the Arabs frowned upon this. Could he not find anyone better than this crow to give the adhan? These are the words. Forgive me for the offensive tone, but that's the way people used to speak back in the day. Could he not have found better than this crow to call for the prayer? The Arabs said this, the Sahaba. After all, they were humans, infested with complexes. Yes, superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, free man over a freed slave, white or black or whatever their biases were. The Prophet Muhammad recited this verse, and according to some, this verse was revealed at that point. Now listen to this verse and see that he definitely would have been successful after this sort of an outlook. يا أيها الإنسان إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا أن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. Look at this verse. Amazing. O people, we have created you from a male and a female. And the Prophet said this in his sermon. You have all been created from Adam and from Hawa, and that's it. You have the same lineage, all of you. There is no priority to either any one of you or another. So the verse says, O mankind, we have created you from a single male and a single female. We have made you into tribes and nations, so that by mutual interaction you begin to understand the essence that the closest one to Allah is the one who is most God-weary, God-conscious, God-like, godly. In this verse, God is throwing away any distinction between not only white and black, rich and poor, Arab and non-Arab, free and slave. He is throwing away the distinctions between Muslim and non-Muslim, between people of Abrahamic faith and people of non-Abrahamic faith. He is ridding it all. Everything is out. And this resonates with those verses in Surah Baqarah and Al Imran. There are some verses that who is best in deen than the one who surrenders to Allah, and he is Muhsin. And in Surah Baqarah, this verse is also there. Something to that effect. Or surrender to Allah and be righteous, goodness, and do good to others. That was the essence of everything. So what he said was, be different in the ways in which you are, but only to the level to which it assists you to regulate your lives. But do not discriminate against each other. Do not discriminate, because your lofty goal is your God and nurturing those godly virtues from within. Here, there is no prejudice. There are no biases. There is no discrimination. Here you are all one, whether you be man, woman, free, slaves, black, white, Arab, non-Arab. There is no priority to any one of you. You will not pride yourselves over another. Here, God is the absolute yardstick. And if you arrive to God, then you have nothing to be proud about, because you will be the most humblest of all. For the closest to God was Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he sat on the dirty floor. And he ate sitting on the floor. And he milked goats. And he rode on mules or donkeys. He sat with little children. That was Muhammad Rasulullah. He disliked shows of arrogance and pride. He sat amongst his companions in a way that people could not distinguish him or distinguish between him and his companions. He had tears in his eyes at nights when he prayed to Allah. When he saw orphans being ill-treated, he cried and his heart broke. When his enemies came to him, he said, I forgive you. Muhammad Rasulullah, and I'm going to narrate this, and I'm sorry my time has gone, but I have to do the other next khutbah. I believe in this tradition. That as he was dying, the pain was bitter. So he says to the angel of death, lessen the pain. He said, dear messenger, this is the pain that will be incurred at the very least by every soul departing from this world. In that case, give me the sum total of all the pains that are to be endured by my ummah till the day of Qiyamah, so that none has to go through the pain that I'm going through. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the sake of our blessed Prophet, enlighten our souls and our hearts. May Allah forgive us. May Allah alleviate the oppression upon the oppressed people. May Allah bring to swift justice and accountability the oppressors of this earth. Can we recite Surah Fatiha for all those poor people who have lost their lives in Palestine, in Lebanon, and elsewhere in this world, be they Muslims or non-Muslims? Al-Fatiha. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. بسم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Forgive me for going over time. We are faced with current crisis of Islamophobia and immigration. Now, as far as immigration is concerned, of course, I don't want to go through the reasons for immigration, but of course, if we go around invading other people's countries and making them unlivable, then obviously we will get people coming here. And two, in the 90s, when we encouraged immigration, it was only because we needed the workforce. And before that, we needed people of other countries, other colors, to come and fight our wars for us. So I think, it's not altogether immigration that people have come to this country because this is such a beautiful country that they want to leave their lands. A lot of immigration has been encouraged by our foreign policies and our actions, which have been quite unjust, going into Iraq, for example. And now when the Palestinians have no land, and if they come here and then we demonstrate against immigration, I think we need to ask the deeper question that why is this happening? But in any case, on the issue of immigration, I want to take the other side as well. Yes, the people of this country do have a legitimate concern. It is true. Because I know from my own lived experience within a community, the Khoja community, the Punjabi community, the Iranian community, and to an extent the Iraqi community, that when there is a community set up, when foreigners come in, it is always a threat that our ways of doing things will not be sustained. So people are afraid. And it is something that we can acknowledge to be a genuine problem. So if you go to Iran, Saudi Arabia, any of our Muslim countries, aside from maybe Pakistan, you will find this resistance towards immigration because people want to retain the status quo, their cultures. It is a human frailty and human weakness, and it is to be acknowledged. At times, it is also a genuine concern that when people, I'm talking from the community background, that when people who do not understand the sentiment of the community, that they can totally ruin the functioning of the community if they are not in line with it. So they have to be introduced within the community, they have to be nurtured, cultured, and then they are made into office bearers. So for example, they know the ways of the community. And this is only natural. This is because we are still at an early stage in our human evolution. We are not there where the bodily distinctions and differences can fade away simply. We are still very bodily, but we are getting there. However, this is the reality at present. So when they talk about immigration, I do not feel that all of them are racist. Yes. But the racist tendencies emerge overwhelmingly. And the way these people are demonstrating, like attacking the police, setting alight police cars, attacking hotels, these are scenes that are not to be expected of any decent, reasonable human being. So I will say this, that there's a lot of racism that is emerging from time to time, but this racism is not only directed towards blacks. By black, I mean anyone non-white. Yes, or towards Muslims. During the Brexit vote, there were so many cases of anti-European racism. The Europeans did not feel safe here. So there is a lot of racism within the community. And there are causes that they feel their work is being taken, so on and so forth. However, there are certain parties that are nefarious, and they are using this to their advantage. Tommy Robinson, I was watching one of his speeches. In 10 minutes, he repeated 6 to 12 times, because I lost count, that these Muslims going around raping people. Now look at the statistics of rapes in this country, right? They are making a claim that 60% of rapes are committed by Muslims. No, that's not the case. That's simply not the case, yes? Any rape committed by a Muslim is wrong, but a Muslim does not commit a rape because of being a Muslim. If anything, a Muslim commits rape because he has moved away from Islam. But this is being portrayed as Islam encouraging such behavior. And he said, carrying those demonstrations, carrying Hamas flags and ISIS flags. Does Hamas have a flag, or is it the Palestinian flag? And if you look at the ISIS in this conflict, in this war against the people of Palestine, has anybody seen ISIS attack the Zionists or protest against the Zionists or go into Palestine and fight against the Zionists? Has anybody seen that? If anything, we heard recently that the ISIS have been killing Muslims again. So the job of the ISIS is to kill Muslims. They have no problem with the Zionists. Apparently, it appears that way. But what he is doing is he's playing on the sentiments of people who are not aware. You see, the people are just not aware. And when you show these people decapitated bodies of the children, and I was watching their demonstrations and the interviews, they said, no, that's wrong. Even the people marching on the streets with Tommy Robinson under his agenda of racism, anti-immigration and Islamophobia, even those people are saying, no, killing children is not right. But when Suella Braverman and the Tory government calls these marches hate marches, then obviously people like Tommy Robinson are not to be faulted for using the same language. What that does is, it actually influences the naive minds, and they don't know what they are saying, what they are doing. So a lot of these people who are racist, but they don't know what racism actually means and why they are racist. A lot of these people who are anti-immigrant, a lot of these people who are not anti-immigrant but are concerned with immigration, they are being lumped with these people. And they are not to be taken as those people. And those people who are racist and Islamophobes, they themselves don't know what they are talking about. So here is a legitimate problem. Now, what accentuates this problem is when they say, see, this is what the Muslims are doing. And that then cements their false notions of Islam. So then, look at the life of the Prophet. Has he ever killed a blasphemer? So Mufti Farooq, in our DIA meetings, he was analyzing, he said, look, I've got 3 incidents. 2 are Sahih, in which the Prophet said, forgive the person who is swearing and abusing at me. One is an incident, according to Sunni sort of evaluation of hadith. He said, this is a weak one, but it says in which the Prophet said, go and kill him. So he said, we are using the weak one and overlooking the 2 strong ones in which the Prophet pardoned. Now think about the foresight of the blessed Prophet in the Quran. The Quran says, وَلَا تُجَادِلْ بِالْأَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Now do not engage with them save in the best possible manner. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْهُمْ, except for those who are oppressive amongst them. وَقُولُوا, but say to them, we bring faith in whatever has been revealed unto us and has been revealed unto you. وَإِلَهُنَا وَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ. What? Our God and your God is one God. The Quran is saying, وَنَحْنُ لَهُ مُسْلِمُونَ, and the Quran is saying, talk with them in this way because there is a lot of misunderstanding. Now, in this country, they're saying we have freedom of expression. And it is true, we do. Muslim countries don't allow freedom of expression, and we know this. In this country, any one of us can aspire to become the Prime Minister. It's a fact we can. Although I know there are restrictions on non-whites, I understand that there is racism within. But it is not something that is welcomed, it's frowned upon, and they are also trying to remove this. Especially, Sadiq Khan is the mayor of London for the 2nd, 3rd time. Yeah? Despite Islamophobia. You see, there is goodness here. In our Muslim countries, which country would allow you citizenship or allow you to buy a house and reside there? Forget about becoming the prime minister or we have prime ministers here, or president. Which one will allow you? Say, no, look, it's leagues ahead of the rest of the world, this country. But think about this. There is freedom of expression. Now, if somebody criticizes the Prophet and we bring about this law of blasphemy and we want to kill them, it doesn't work. Or somebody burns the Quran and we go around marching like the racists, the far right, who are marching and destroying things and burning cars. and attacking buildings, if we do the same thing, what will it do? It will create this impression that these people are intolerant and they are barbaric. I want to look at the deeper things, that we are actually intolerant people. We are not tolerant people. You say anything in Islam against the Muslim teachings, you will be killed. Forget that. You challenge the Maulana's opinions, you will be ostracized. You challenge the Mujtahid, you will be banned. You challenge the Ayatollah, you will be you will be blamed as an MI6 agent. We have zero tolerance. It's a fact. There is a problem with us. Did the Prophet kill an apostate? The apostasy wars were after the demise of the Prophet in the time of Khalifa Abu Bakr. Nothing to do with the Prophet. The Quran doesn't have a single verse about apostasy. Kill them. So I'm asking a question here. If the Blessed Prophet was here today, and if non-Muslims were to burn the Quran, how do you think the Prophet would have responded? The Prophet would have said that the Quran that you are burning, the one talking inside there, is telling us to be calm and to treat you as our brothers. And that response would change all those negative people. They would say, no, they're not like the way we've understood them to be. This book actually teaches them not only tolerance, but to accept our right and to deal with us with care and love. That would have been the response of the Prophet. Because at the conquest of Makkah, what did he do? When he had the upper hand, what did he do? Did he seek revenge? Did he go after their blood? What did he do? He said, no, you are all equal now. You are all equal. There is no claim anyone has against you. This would have been the response of the Prophet. So I think there is something here for us to introspect and recognize that actually we are doing disservice to Islam in the way we are behaving, and there is a problem with intolerance within us. And we need to teach tolerance. We need to reteach the prophetic life and his manner. Now, final argument, we will say that it's a country in which there is freedom of expression, but there isn't a freedom of expression because you can't say critically anything about Israel and the Zionists and the government, and that's true. And that's true. There's a crackdown on anybody who speaks against Zionism. That's true. I understand that. But there is freedom to challenge that properly, and we need to challenge it that, look, no, you should allow freedom of expression and thought. It's not seen as, it's not hate speech. You can criticize Islam, fine, there's no problem. And everybody should be allowed to criticize the governmental policies, and everybody should be allowed to criticize Iran, and everybody should be allowed to criticize Hezbollah, and everybody should be allowed to criticize the state of Israel and the Zionists. Everyone should be equal in that rule of freedom of speech. I'll stop there. Thank you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Muhammadin al-Mustafa wa ala Ali al-Murtada wa ala Fatimah al-Zahra wa ala al-Hasan al-Mujtaba وعلى الحسين الشهيد بكربلاء وعلى المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. اللهم عجل فرج مولانا إمامنا المنتظر واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه والمستشهدين بين يديه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.